The evening was cold. I was walking back home when I heard noise around the corner, shouting, the sound of fists, chaos. When I got closer, I saw a group of men. They were beating someone to the ground. I froze. I couldn't fight them, but I couldn't just walk away either. So I pulled out my phone and started recording. I kept filming until the very last breath left his body. They killed him right in front of me. And then, they noticed me. Their eyes locked with mine. I knew instantly they had memorized my face. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out. They chased me, but I disappeared into the night. The next day, I went to the police and handed over the video. They arrested the men. I thought it was over. But I didn't know they were Mafia. And one night, when I returned home, silence greeted me. Cold, heavy silence. My entire family lay on the floor. Dead. In that moment, I realized they had taken everything. And that meant I had nothing left to lose. The church was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that pressed against your ears and made you hear your own heartbeat. 3 coffins stood in front of me. My mother. My father. My younger sister. The priest spoke words of comfort, but I couldn't hear them. My mind was far away, replaying that night, the sound of their laughter before I opened the door, the sudden void after. Friends came to hug me, neighbors offered condolences, but none of it mattered. Their words felt empty. Because the only truth that mattered was this. My family was gone because of me. When the service ended, I stood there long after everyone left. Rain began to fall, cold drops sliding down my face, mixing with the tears I refused to admit were mine. I whispered to the graves. I swear. I won't let them breathe free another day. That night I couldn't sleep. My apartment felt hollow, every corner echoing with absence. So I opened my laptop. Not for distraction, for research. I started digging into names, faces, mugshots. The men I saw that night weren't just thugs. They were part of something larger, a web stretching across the city. Drugs, extortion, murder for hire. And the man who had given the order? Victor Moretti. Mafia boss. Ruthless. Untouchable. But not untouchable to me. For hours I read everything I could find. Police reports, old articles, whispers on forums. Piece by piece, a map formed in my mind. Their bars, their businesses, their safe houses. I wasn't a killer. Not yet. But grief is a teacher and revenge is a fast education. I bought a burner phone. Then another. Fake IDs, cash from pawn jewelry. I knew the police couldn't protect me. Hell, some of them were probably on Moretti's payroll. This was on me. Me alone. When dawn broke, I looked at myself in the mirror. Hollow eyes, trembling hands, but a fire in my chest that hadn't been there before. I whispered again, this time to myself. They took everything. Now I'll take everything from them. The bar smelled of whiskey, cigarettes, and fear. It was one of Moretti's places, small, dirty, but always full of his men. I walked in with a hood pulled low, hands shaking inside my jacket pocket. Not from fear. From adrenaline. From rage that had been simmering since the night I buried my family. At the counter, 2 men laughed too loud, their tattoos screaming loyalty to the Mafia. Another sat near the door, his eyes scanning the room like a guard dog. I didn't order a drink. I didn't sit down. I just pulled out my phone, pretending to text while the camera captured their faces. Evidence. That's how it started. But then, I saw him. One of the men I recognized from that night. The night they killed the stranger. The night they saw me. His broken nose and scar across the cheek were burned into my memory. My heart raced. I shouldn't have stayed. I should have left. But something inside me snapped. I followed him when he stumbled into the alley for a smoke. The cold air hit my lungs as I pulled the knife from my pocket. Cheap, bought the day before. He didn't notice me until I was right behind him. Got a light? I asked, my voice steady though my hand trembled. He turned, squinting through the smoke. And then his eyes widened with recognition. You. The blade went in before he could finish. My hand drove it deep into his stomach. His breath hitched, a wet gasp, and I pressed him against the wall as blood spilled onto my hand. For a second I froze, watching his life drain out of him. My first kill. Then I leaned closer and whispered, "Remember my face. I'm the last thing you'll ever see." When he collapsed, I stumbled back, heart hammering like a war drum. The alley was quiet again. Only the sound of my own ragged breathing. I wiped the knife on his jacket and forced myself to walk away, blending into the city night. That was the moment I knew there was no turning back. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was the executioner. The city didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. I walked for hours, my shoes soaked in the London rain, the smell of blood still clinging to my hands even after I scrubbed them raw. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every passing car felt like a tale. The paranoia was eating me alive. But when I finally dragged myself back to my empty flat, exhaustion won. I collapsed onto the couch, knife still in my hand, and drifted into a restless sleep. The phone woke me. At first, I thought it was a dream, that shrill, cutting ring slicing through the silence. But it was real. It was 3:17 a.m. I picked it up. No one spoke at first. Only silence. Then a voice. Come. Cold. Familiar. You should have stayed quiet. My blood froze. I didn't recognize the number, but I recognized the weight of the voice. Authority. Danger. You think killing one soldier makes you safe? The man continued. All you did was paint a target on your back. We know who you are. We know where you live. And sooner or later. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard the phone slipped from my grip. But my stomach felt like stone. Because I knew what came next. They wouldn't just come for me. They'd burn the whole city if it meant sending a message. I stared at the knife on the table. My reflection in the blade looked like a stranger. Scared. Broken. Dangerous. For a long time I told myself I wasn't a killer. That the first man was an accident, a desperate reaction. But the voice on the phone had changed everything. They wanted a war. I'd give them one. I opened the drawer and pulled out the pistol I swore I'd never use. Loaded it. The click of the magazine locking in place echoed through the empty room. The fear was still there. But now it sat beside something bigger. Rage. The city was still dark when I stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the streets glistened under the flickering streetlights, like veins of a dying beast. I walked with my hood up, pistol hidden under my jacket. Not because I wanted to kill, but because I had no choice anymore. They killed my family. They hunted me. Now the only path left was forward. I didn't go back to the police. They were useless, maybe even compromised. No, I needed information, and there was only one place in London that could give it to me. A dive bar in East End. A place where gangsters, smugglers, and liars bled into the same whiskey glass. When I pushed the door open, the stench of cigarettes and cheap beer hit me like a wall. Eyes turned. Heavy, suspicious stares. I walked to the bar, ordered nothing, and leaned close to the bartender. I'm looking for the ones who beat a man to death last week. The ones who run this city after dark. The bartender froze, his hand gripping the glass too tightly. You don't want to ask questions like that, mate? I pulled a 50-pound note from my pocket, slid it across the bar. Then another. He hesitated, glanced around, then leaned closer. They call themselves the Serpents. Old Mafia roots, Eastern European. You don't find them. They find you. I felt the rage in my chest tighten like a noose. Well, I whispered, then I'll make sure they find me. That night I sat in my flat with nothing but a notebook, a pistol, and rage. I wrote one word on the first page: revenge. Beneath it I started a list. Every name I could find. Every place they owned. Every weakness they might have. It wasn't about justice anymore. It wasn't even about survival. It was about sending a message. The Serpents thought they were predators. But tonight I swore an oath. I'd become worse than a predator. I'd become their shadow. Their nightmare. And I wouldn't stop until the last of them was buried. The night had a heartbeat. The city pulsed with neon, but under the surface, under the clubs, the laughter, the taxis, was rot. And I was going straight for it. I tracked their hangout to a private club on the edge of Soho. The Serpents owned it. No signs outside, just a black door with a single camera overhead. The kind of place where women disappeared and drugs flowed like water. I waited across the street for hours, blending with the shadows. Watching. Counting. 3 guards out front. A bouncer. 2 cameras. A Mercedes that screamed boss inside. Finally, at 2 a.m., the line of expensive cars started to leave. Laughter echoed. Men with gold chains, too drunk to notice the predator in the dark. I moved. The first guard never saw me coming. A quick chokehold in the alley, silent, efficient. I dragged him behind a dumpster. One less problem. The second spotted me too late. He reached for his gun, but mine was already pressed against his ribs. I whispered, "Where's your boss?" He spat blood in my face, smirking. "Go to hell." So I sent him there. 1 shot. Quick, clean. The third ran, but fear made him clumsy. He didn't get far. Inside, the club was still alive, music pounding, lights flashing. But the dancers froze when they saw me. A man dressed in black, gun in hand, eyes burning with something they couldn't name. I walked through the crowd like a ghost. straight to the VIP lounge. And there he was. One of the men I saw that night. The bastard who kicked the victim until he stopped moving. His laughter still haunted me. Now he was laughing again, surrounded by women, champagne in hand. I raised my gun. The music stopped. His smile died. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "You," he whispered. "Me," I said. One pull of the trigger and his blood painted the velvet couch. The women screamed. The serpents who were still inside drew their weapons. And just like that, the war began. The club was chaos. Screams. Shattered glass. People running for the exits like rats escaping a sinking ship. But I wasn't running. Not anymore. I stood over the man's body, the bastard whose boots had crushed the life out of that stranger weeks ago. His blood spread across the velvet like spilled wine. His eyes were still open, frozen in disbelief. The serpents raised their guns, but I was faster. 2 shots, 3 shots. One fell, another screamed, the rest ducked for cover. The women crawled out on their knees, heels snapping, mascara running. I reached into my jacket. Not for another clip. For the camera. Click. I took a photo of the corpse, of the scene, of the fear in their eyes. "This isn't just revenge," I whispered loud enough for them to hear. "This is justice. And the world will see." I sprayed the wall with his blood, dragging my gloved hand across the wallpaper. A mark. A symbol. Something they couldn't erase. Then I dropped the photo camera on the boss's chest. The flash went off one last time. The message was clear. I was watching them. I wasn't afraid. And I wasn't done. By the time I slipped out the back, sirens were already in the distance. Someone had called the police. But when they came, they'd find only carnage. And a war just beginning. They came at dawn. The world was still half asleep, London wrapped in grey fog and silence. I had just poured black coffee into a chipped mug when I felt it, the shift in the air. A crunch outside. A shadow at the window. Then, boom. The front of my flat exploded inward as the door was kicked off its hinges. "Down!" someone shouted, masked figures storming inside, shotguns raised. I dove behind the kitchen counter as pellets shredded the cupboards, blasting ceramic into dust. My mug shattered beside me, black coffee mixing with plaster and glass. They weren't cops. They weren't amateurs. They were serpents. One of them laughed as he kicked through the wreckage. "Boss says hello, rat." Adrenaline drowned my fear. I grabbed the butcher's knife, the only weapon within reach. When the first man rounded the corner, I didn't hesitate. I slashed deep across his thigh, felt the blade cut muscle. He screamed, stumbled. The others opened fire. I threw myself out the back window, glass carving into my arms as I rolled into the alley. The fog was thick, but their footsteps chased me. Heavy boots pounding against the pavement. A van screeched into the alley ahead, blocking my way. The back doors swung open, 2 more masked men inside, one holding a crowbar, the other a chain. I was trapped. For a second I thought it was over. That they'd drag me inside, beat me until I begged for death, then dump me in the Thames like the stranger I had filmed. But then I remembered. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was the executioner. I tightened my grip on the knife, blood dripping from my palm. My heart pounded, not with fear but with fury. "Come on," I whispered. "Let's finish this." The first man lunged at me with the crowbar. I sidestepped, blade flashing, and carved into his arm. The metal bar clattered to the ground as his scream tore through the fog. The second swung the chain. It caught my shoulder, ripping skin, fire spreading down my arm. But I didn't stop. I rammed the knife under his ribs, twisting until his breath gurgled out. The van doors slammed shut. The driver hit the gas, abandoning his men. Silence returned, broken only by the groans of the dying. My hands trembled, but not with weakness. With clarity. They thought they could erase me. They thought wrong. I couldn't go to the police. The serpents had eyes everywhere, corrupt officers, bought lawyers, politicians with blood on their suits. So I went underground. For weeks I studied them, where they moved, where they ate, who they trusted. Every night I followed them through the city's veins, camera in one hand, knife in the other. One by one they vanished. A dealer found drowned in the Thames with his pockets full of bricks. A lone shark hanging from his own chains in an abandoned warehouse. A crooked cop burned alive in his car on the outskirts. The papers called it a gang war. But it wasn't. It was my war. Only one remained. Victor Kane, the man at the top of the serpents. The one who had ordered my family's execution like it was nothing. He lived like a king in a fortress. Glass mansion on the hill, guards patrolling with rifles, dogs snarling behind iron gates. I watched for days waiting. And then came the perfect night. Storm clouds heavy, thunder rolling, rain washing the streets clean. I cut the power. The mansion went dark. Like a shadow, I slipped past the guards, silenced the dogs with raw meat laced with poison. And then I was in his study. He sat there, glass of whiskey in hand, not surprised. "I knew you'd come," he said, voice calm. "You've caused me a lot of trouble." "You killed my family," I whispered. He smirked. "That's the price of playing hero." I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I put the knife to his throat and dragged it across in one clean stroke. His blood spilled over the mahogany desk, mixing with the amber of his whiskey. The storm outside swallowed the sound of his last breath. When it was over, I stood at the top of the hill, rain soaking through my clothes, the mansion burning behind me. Revenge hadn't brought peace. It hadn't healed me. But it had balanced the scales. And in a world like this, sometimes balance is the closest thing to justice. I walked away into the storm, no family left, no future certain. But one truth burned in my chest. They would never touch me again.